So if you're interested in hearing about that time that I got my ass kicked by the YouTube watch community and then how I made it worse by thinking that I could actually explain myself and everybody be like, oh, okay, now I get the joke. They didn't get the joke and I should have shut the fuck up. Anyway, today I want to talk a little bit about that story because I learned a lot from that one really unfortunate, or should I say questionable, choice in video topics. We got to back up though. All right, so here's the deal. On YouTube in general, there are different segments of sort of communities, right? There's the fitness guys, there's the fragrance guys, there's the watch guys, there's the style guys, there's the lifestyle guys, right? I am what I would consider a lifestyle. I'll talk a little bit about a lot of things, right? If it pertains to dudes, right? Getting more action or feeling great about themselves, boom, I'm there, right? Well, the truth is that I am also not a watch expert, right? I love watches though. I've always loved watches. My first watch I ever got was a little calculator watch, and that thing, when I put it on my wrist, boom, it made me feel so cool, and I loved it, right? It was a Casio, and I love that watch. That basically, that got me into watches, right? And then swatches, I got really into those for a while. And then I saw a watch that changed everything for me, and that was a Rolex Milgauss, right? It was on the cover of a GQ magazine, and I thought to myself, someday, if I'm ever fortunate enough to be able to afford a super nice watch, that's the watch I'm gonna get. That's how I got into watches, but I am not a watch expert. Now, something else to note about some of these subsets or communities is that they are very opinionated, right? They also love what they talk about, right? And when it comes to fragrance and then watches specifically, there is an air, how do I say it? Little snobby, little pretentious at times. Not everybody, but a lot of them have that kind of air. Now, that being said, it's not just super premium watches that they talk about or that is acceptable in this community, right? There are a lot of lower end watches that still are embraced by the community, like Seiko and Orient, right? These watches, and Swatch even, right? They're acceptable. Casio, they're acceptable because they aren't a fashion watch. And that is one thing that they all pretty much can agree sucks. And that is fashion watches. These watches that basically these brands will come out with that just look cool and they charge $100, $200, and as they put it, they're cheap China crap, right? Typically, they are going to actually have some type of quartz movement in there, which, is kind of synonymous with the fashion watches. Not that there's anything wrong with the quartz movement, but when it comes to somebody promoting a watch and saying, hey, this watch is better than this watch, which was the whole thing in premise, it's something that I think everybody in the watch community has a problem with, right? The other thing they have a problem with is movement watches, right? Movement watches is basically the poster child to everything that is wrong in the watch world, according to the watch community, right? And the thing that I loved about Movement Watch was kind of their story, right? I also love the fact that they were interested in promoting and advertising on my YouTube channel, right? They paid me very well to do that. And so one of the things that Movement did, they basically, in my opinion, kind of pioneered, I love what they did, all right? What they did basically was they decided, it was a guy named Jake and Kramer that were in college, and they're like, yo, we want to start a watch business. And so they went to Indiegogo, and they raised a few $100,000 for this watch concept. They called it Movement, and their whole story is, hey, we can't afford super expensive watches, but we want a badass watch, right? And so they funded it, and once they actually had these, then it was kind of off to the races, right? They utilized what they knew because they were millennials in terms of promotion in order to grow the brand. They used a lot of, social media ads, not to mention influencers, right? In the space of, men's lifestyle, not to mention a lot of other, people that were talking about watches and it fit with their demographic. Well, what they did, in my opinion, was spectacular. And then years later, they were so successful, they had the opportunity to sell Movement watches to Movado, a very reputable and kind of legacy watch brand, for $90 million. And so I was one of the fortunate influencers that was able to promote this brand, right? And the thing that I really loved about Movement watches is that the watches look really cool, right? And if you're not somebody that is really caring about the heritage of a specific watch, and you just want a watch that looks really cool, that isn't going to break the bank, these things are awesome in my opinion. And that's the one thing. I have never, except one time, and I'll tell you just one time, I just took something that I knew I shouldn't in terms of a promotion, right? Everything that I do, I believe in. I believe in the product. I believe in the value that it brings. Now, does it mean that everybody that watches or has an opinion agrees with me or feels that what I talk about and promote is actually a good product? No, absolutely not. But the beautiful thing is that I do. And if I feel that it resonates or that it's appropriate for my audience, then I am all about promoting it, right? Few other examples, right? Like leather bags, right? Leather bags are an example of a product that I try to stay away from in terms of promotions. Why? Because, you know, in my opinion, I know my demographic, and I also know that trying to convince somebody or to sell somebody a leather bag for $500 is a little bit ridiculous, right? And so I typically don't promote those products. There was one time, though, that I took a product or I took a deal for the money. It was for the paycheck, I gotta be honest, right? And I was like, you know what, whatever, I'll do it, right? It was a good product. It wasn't like shit, but I knew better. And I did the promotion, and right away, I got ripped a new asshole, right? And I'm like, fuck. I'm like, this sucks. I knew better. I shouldn't have done this. And it taught me a very valuable lesson when it comes to promotions, right? And so what did I end up doing? I actually took the video down and I gave the company their money back. I'm like, I'm sorry, this just isn't right for my channel or my brand or my audience. And that was that. It taught me a very valuable lesson not to ever do that again. So anyway, back to Movement. So Movement approached me and they basically did a bunch of deals with me. I think it was like one deal a month, right? Well, and this was for, I think, like years. They were an amazing sponsor. And for the record, they're not a sponsor anymore. And this is me just telling you about that story and that time that I compared them to Rolex. Anyway, so they came out with an automatic watch, right? Up until this point, the only watches that Movement sold were quartz Movement, right? And so they came out with this $300, they used the Miyota Movement or something like super like good. And they were like, hey, we've got this new automatic watch. Can you talk about it? I'm like, sure, I loved it. It was awesome. It had like a little like domed, it was badass, right? Kind of had, it was really a great watch and I thought it was awesome. So I was like, sure, how can I talk about Movement watches in a way and talk about the fact that they are now doing an automatic movement, right? Which is, in my opinion, like perfection, right? So I thought, okay, how can I do this? And I thought, genius, right? Me brainstorming, what would be a very like clickable title? And so when you're making videos, when you're doing like internet stuff, right? You want to make sure that you get attention, right? And sometimes the most outlandish claims are going to get the most, you know, the most clicks, the most views. And so I thought, what would be great is, and here's where I may have made a slight miscalculation. What would be great is if I compared the Movement automatic watch to a Rolex. Everybody knows that a Rolex is like the pinnacle, or in my opinion, you know, at least it's an amazing brand with incredible heritage. And how dare anybody, or why would anybody consider a fashion watch to be on par with something that is so amazingly like awesome as a Rolex, right? And that was the joke, in my opinion, or I thought it was a joke. Apparently, it did not land like a joke. It landed like a turd in a punch bowl, as they say. So anyway, I thought, hey, Movement versus Rolex, I'm going to talk about 5 reasons why Movements are actually better than Rolex, right? In my head, it worked. And when I look back, and I'm going to link to that video down below if you guys want to go check it out and watch it. In my head, it worked, and in my head, it was kind of funny, right? And I did 5 reasons, all right? 4 of them, nobody can argue with. But the first one, that's the thing that got me in trouble. And I thought I was being facetious. I thought it was like tongue-in-cheek that people were going to get it, right? The first thing I said was heritage, right? And I said, you know, Rolex is started in 1905 by Hans Rohlsdorf or Wohlsdorf or whatever, and some other dude, you know, and okay, like great, like legacy brand. Now Movement was started by 2 dudes, Jake and Kramer, and I resonate with them because, well, they're entrepreneurs like me, they're young, they're millennials, and I think it's a really cool story, right? And so I go, so in that category, I'm gonna give it to Movement. That was where I made the biggest mistake, all right? Because from that, everybody was like, yo, you were just trying to sell cheap Chinese shit to people, and we know better, right? And the watch community freaked the fuck out, right? A few of the other reasons that I gave, all right? Number one, affordability, of course, right? Movements are much more affordable than Rolex. Another one is accessibility. At the time, trying to get a Rolex was literally like having to give a kidney to get on a list. It was really, really hard because Rolex was squeezing the market and they weren't actually making and manufacturing watches. So there were a lot of movement watches. You can get these very easily, right? Another one was accuracy, which it's true. A movement watch or any watch with a quartz movement is much more accurate than an automatic watch, right? Automatic though is, a little bit classier, it's a little bit sexier, and in my opinion, it's just the next level, right? It's almost like you develop a relationship with your watch because if you take it off, it stops, right? You got to wind it, you got to make sure everything's kosher. Well, with a quartz movement watch, you don't have to do that. And so one of my reasons was it's more accurate, which it is. And another one was the oh fuck factor. In terms of if you lose a Rolex watch, oh fuck, right? $10,000, $12,000, $20,000. If you lose a movement watch, it's gonna suck because you like the watch, but it's not quite like, oh fuck, I just lost a $10,000 watch. And so my reasons, I think, were pretty solid, other than the first one. So I post the video, right? And at first it was like, nah, no big deal, right? The video didn't get like the lift that I thought it would. It really didn't get like the attention. People didn't really find it that great, right? But there was a community that saw it and absolutely freaked out. And the reason why they were freaking out is because I was basically, in their mind, trying to just pitch and sell people a cheap China product, right? And they felt like it was an integrity thing and that I was a big scam artist. And I am not saying that they were wrong to think that or to feel that way, and I can see how they would. That was not the intention and the spirit of what I was doing, but it didn't matter. What happened after that was a shit show for me. All of a sudden, all these watch people, because here's the other thing, when you're like niche, like fragrances or watches or cars or something like that, like it's kind of a slow news day most days, right? Sometimes you'll have like, once a year you'll have new releases coming out, but generally speaking, you're scratching your head, what's gonna be a video that I can do? Like 6 best, dive watches that aren't a Rolex, or 2 watches that are amazing for under like $600, like whatever. Like you've got to think about these things, right? Well, when the biggest lifestyle YouTuber comes out and says, this is better than this, it was like, oh mama, gold mine. Why? Because in the world of influence and YouTube and any social media, talking about somebody who is tall, or not tall, I'm short, big in terms of a big influencer or personality or somebody that has a large following, right? When they say something like that, it's gonna be great because they know it's gonna get a lot of clicks. They know that a lot of people are gonna be into it because people like to see people on top fall. It's just human nature, right? And they know that it's salacious, right? They know that they're gonna get a lot of views. They're talking about somebody big. And so these type of videos always do well, right? Drama always sells. And so there was one video that came out, 2 videos that came out, 20 videos that came out, and I was like, fuck, I may have made a miscalculation with this. And the type of guy that I am, I normally, and that's the one thing, right? I have had, over my illustrious YouTube career, tons of people make horrible videos about me, right? Whether or not it's my fitness advice sucks, or my style advice sucks, or I just suck as a human being, and that I'm a huge piece of shit, like whatever. And normally, I don't respond, right? It's like, you know what? This will die off. And that is what I should have done with the movement Rolex situation. I didn't though, because it was like, shit, and it was a lot of people, right? And I felt like, guys, it was a joke. How did people not get that it was just a joke? And that I don't actually think that movement watches are, as a general watch, better than Rolex, right? It was a joke. I thought it was a joke. I thought people would get it. They didn't. Some people I'm sure did, but the watch community, it's like, it doesn't matter if they even knew it was a joke. They were coming for blood. And I was the recipient. Not saying that I didn't deserve it. Not saying anything other than I made it worse for myself. And the reason is because there was a dude named Teddy that I knew, right? And I had went on his YouTube channel. He wanted to interview me because he knew I was into watches. And this was years ago before he had a following. He had a few thousand subscribers. And I'm the type of guy that I'll talk to pretty much anybody, right? And I enjoy it. I enjoy helping people. And so I did an interview with him before, and I was like, hey, this guy, he's my friend. And so, of course, like, he seems like a reasonable dude, and he's going to get it, and I'm just going to go on. He emailed me. That's what happened. He emailed me and say, hey, there's this video. Do you want to come on and talk about it and explain yourself? I thought, sure. What could go wrong? Famous last words, right? And I thought that it was going to be, hey, one reasonable dude talking to another reasonable dude about something that was funny and it wasn't funny, and let me explain myself. And that's part of the problem. Trying to explain yourself to people that do not want to hear anything other than what they believe, or have an agenda, or want to make you look bad, don't do it. The one thing you got to remember is that the internet in general has a very short memory, right? You're going to be popular. If somebody, or you do something, right? You've got to decide, am I going to take the video down? The answer was no, because it was, in my opinion, nothing wrong with the video, and it was just kind of a fun way to try to promote a product. And I didn't feel like I was really doing anything wrong. Number two, what do you do? Do you do a reaction video? And that's just giving and fueling the process. It's fueling the trolls. It's fueling what's going on. And so I'm like, no, right? And typically you don't want to do that. Or you can do what I did, which was, let me talk to somebody that I considered a friend. They're not my friend anymore. Anyway, long story short, he reached out. He said, hey, do you want to come on? I'm like, yes. Because I'm like, hey, it's a good dude that I know, and he's going to be totally cool, and he's going to hear me talk about, the reason and why it was a joke, and then that was going to be that, right? Nope, not at all. So we do this interview, and right away the first thing is, okay, well, let's ask you a few questions. Okay, let's do it. And he says, you said that movement had better, and he's taken the video down, the interview down since then. I actually went to go look for it the other day, and it's gone. Anyway, not going to say anything negative about him. And so basically what happened was he started with, the first thing is, hey, you said heritage. Why should anybody believe you? It seems like you're just trying to sell cheap shot. I'm like, no, it was a joke. And I thought people would get it. And no, of course I don't believe that. And he goes, well, you said it. Why would you say it? I'm like, once again, at that point, I knew that this interview was going nowhere good. And then later on, he actually had this dude. He's like, hey, well, can I have a few people ask you questions? They've sent in, video questions for you about this situation. I'm like, at this point, I was so uncomfortable. And I was like, get me the fuck out of here. I'm like, sure. Because I already knew that I looked like an asshole. And there's this dude named Archie Luxury, which was this loudmouth, over-the-top person in the watch community. And he comes on and goes, Alvin, you fucking piece of shit, you suck. And he basically, and I'm sitting there watching this, and he gets done, and I look and I say to the guy interviewing me, I go, did you pay him to say that? And he starts laughing. He goes, yeah. And at that point, I'm like, this is insane. This is so set up. I gotta go. And so anyway, we ended it, and that was that. And he's like, if you're really upset, I don't have to post it. I'm like, you know what? No, go ahead. Because I didn't realize how bad I was going to come across. And you know what? It was my kind of bet, and I didn't want to, it was like, how can I make this even worse? I thought, okay, if I tell him not to, and then he does a video about, I did an interview, but he said no, it was just fuck it, go for it. And it was horrible. I posted that video and it was even worse, right? I got obliterated. And it was very painful for me. And that's the thing. I don't typically now read comments or let many things really bother me, but that situation bothered me greatly. But it taught me a very valuable lesson. It taught me that I need to stay in my lane a little bit when I'm making decisions in terms of comparisons and topics. But it also just made me realize, what else did it make me realize? It made me realize that not everybody is like me when it comes to, I guess, this is going to sound funny, but integrity. And what I mean by that is, if I consider somebody like a friend, or if I've got them for life, I got their back. I would never do something intentionally to make somebody look bad or to build myself up. When it comes to this kind of stuff, there's a degree of jealousy, I'm sure, when some people see a bigger person or somebody that's got more followers or more money or whatever, that's grown that they don't feel should have, or, you know, you want the same things, whatever. And I'm not saying that everybody's jealous of me and that's why not at all. Not at all, so don't get it twisted. But knowing that you can get attention and build yourself up by tearing somebody down, this is a very common thing that happens, you know, in our world today. And I am not somebody that does that. I just don't do it because I want to sleep well at night, and I just also, you know, I like helping people. I don't like talking trash about them. I don't want to make people feel bad. I don't want to destroy somebody just to build myself up, which is the reason why I don't do like reaction videos or talk trash about drama or things that happen, right? And so it's just something that I've never done, and it just didn't feel right for me, and so I've never done it. But there are other people, a lot of people, that will seize an opportunity like that. And so anyway, long story short, it was brutal. It taught me a lot of valuable lessons. And, you know, do I regret it? So do I regret it? I regret how I handled it. And I probably do regret the first thing that I said in terms of heritage. I probably should have been a bit more sensitive in that regard. I also should have probably just shut the fuck up and let it pass. But I made it worse for myself, which is another takeaway. Excuse me. When shit is coming down on you, you've got to choose how you handle it. Do you respond? That is the natural, that is what you want. It makes sense, right? In our head, when somebody says something that's not true to you, not true, or is misrepresenting or mischaracterizing you or what you said or what the intention of something that you said, your initial reaction is to respond, right? It's to respond with venom. It's to respond with facts. It's to respond to say, that's fucking crazy. That's not it, right? Unfortunately, it's not going to help. And so what you should do is probably either, if you were really wrong and you made a mistake and it truly is something that you did, you should apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry it offended people. I'm sorry that it upset people. That was not my intention. And be honest and do an apology, right? No problem. That's what you should do. If you fuck up, apologize. But if you don't feel that you really did something that you're being accused of, if you can, just eat it, sit on it, and move on. Because, like I said, the internet does have a short attention span. Now, if you're wrong, apologize and come up and be a man. I've done that before, right? Because, you know, I make some bad decisions. But in this case, it was simply, it was a joke. It was supposed to be tongue-in-cheek. That was mischaracterized and taken out of context. Or it wasn't taken out of context. It was made to be a bigger deal than it actually was, in my opinion. Doesn't mean that they didn't think that I was doing something wrong, and it doesn't mean that people didn't have a right to be mad at me or be angry with what I did or what I said. You're always going to have people. You can teach blind kittens to read, and there's always going to be somebody that is going to have a problem with it. This is the world we live in, right? And so you just got to understand that. No matter what the intention is, it's how it's received. And that is the other lesson that I learned. It's not what I think the message is going to be, it's what other people receive it as. And even though probably the majority of people that saw that video that were not pissed off in the watch community, that were just general, like, got the joke, but the people that didn't get the joke were very vocal and had an audience and they loved talking about it because it made for good content. And so you just got to protect yourself. Think through whatever you're going to post, even if in the moment you think it's a great idea, think, if I do this, if I say this, how will it be received? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. And if you think it's cool, then cool, go for it. If the answer is, I don't know, this could potentially piss a lot of people off, you've got to decide if it's worth it. For me, I never intend on pissing people off. I hate making people angry. I don't like when people don't like me. I'm a people pleaser, if I'm being honest. And so this situation, it was very effective in teaching me a lesson, but it was very painful. And it felt like it went on forever. The good news is that people got over it. But people in the watch community always, always will hate me because I will forever be known as the guy that compared a Rolex to a movement watch. And this, in their world, is totally unacceptable.